How you doing there, guys? Sam here, and welcome to this episode, to the first ever episode of Mob Guys and Gals. So, in this video, we're going to be talking about the 1978 Lufthansa Heist. Now, I'm sure most of you who are watching this video will have seen or at least heard of the film Goodfellas, a great film directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci. In the film, we get to know of a robbery that takes place at JFK Airport at the Lufthansa Cargo terminal in 1978. This was a robbery that actually took place in real life. Now, I must give Martin Scorsese a huge amount of credit here. He gets the events of the film almost exactly as to how they took place in real life. Keep watching for more information. So, the Lufthansa 1978 robbery. What happened? Well, in the early hours of the morning of the 11th of December 1978, 6 men broke into the cargo terminal of Lufthansa Airlines at JFK Airport in New York City. After subduing the staff and disabling the alarms, they entered the vault and escaped with $6 million. That's right, $6 million in cash and jewellery. At the time, it was one of the biggest robberies in American history, and to this day remains one of the biggest ever carried out in the history of the mob. So, how did this robbery come about? Well, it all came about as a result of a Lufthansa Airlines employee who worked at JFK Airport by the name of Louis Werner. At the time, Louis Werner was in debt to a mafia bookkeeper who went by the name of Martin Krugman. Krugman approached a mafia associate of the Lucchese family, Henry Hill, who in the film is played by Ray Liotta. Hill then took this information to Jimmy Burke, also another associate of the Lucchese family. In the film, Jimmy Burke's character goes by the name of Jimmy Conway and is played by Robert De Niro. Jimmy Burke took a huge interest in what Hill told him, as there was a huge potential to steal a large amount of money from the cargo terminal vault. Whilst Henry Hill himself was not directly involved in the heist, it is widely believed that Jimmy Burke was the mastermind of the robbery. Burke himself handpicked 8 men to take part in the robbery. These 8 men would consist of 2 getaway drivers, who would be Jimmy Burke's son Frank and Parnell Stacks Edwards, a frequent drinker at a bar that was known to be a hangout of the Lucchese crime family. In addition to the 2 drivers, there would be 6 robbers. These consisted of Tommy DeSimone, who in the film Goodfellas is portrayed by Joe Pesci. The other men consisted of Angelo Seppe, Louis Carfora, Joe Manri, Paolo Licastri, and Robert McMahon. Each man in the robbery crew was promised a payout of $10,000 to $50,000 depending on what role they played in the robbery. It was decided that the robbery would take place on the 11th of December as Burke and his crew had been tipped off by Werner, who was promised a 10% cut of the loot for his information that a large cash shipment was being held in the Lufthansa vault at that time before it was due to be transferred to the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York City. At around 3 o'clock in the morning of the 11th of December, 2 vehicles, a Buick driven by Frank Burke and a Ford Econoline van driven by Stacks Edwards, drove into the car park of the JFK Airport. Frank Burke stopped the Buick in the car park to be on standby just in case anything went wrong, while Stacks Edwards drove the Econoline van round the back of the cargo terminal to the Lufthansa loading ramp at building 261. When the padlock to the security gate was cut, the robbers made their way inside to the terminal building. When they did so, they took 7 Lufthansa employees hostage and forced them to lie on the floor in the lunchroom with their eyes shut. At the same time that this was going on, another Lufthansa employee, Kerry Whalen, had stopped to investigate the mysterious black van parked at the rear of the terminal building. When he approached the van, one of the robbers left the vehicle and ordered Wayland to get into the van at gunpoint. When Wayland screamed for help, he was hit over the head with the gun and dragged inside to join the other hostages. With the alarms disabled and the on-duty Lufthansa employees secured, the robbers entered the vault and managed to load 72 cartons into the back of the Econoline van. These cartons contained $5 million in cash and nearly $1 million in jewellery. After doing this, the gang finally made their getaway at around 4:20 a.m. in both the van and the Buick that Frank Burke was driving. The Lufthansa employees taken hostage during the robbery were told not to call the police until 4:30 a.m, which would give the robbers enough time to get clear of the airport. Afterwards, they drove to an auto repair shop in Brooklyn, where Jimmy Burke was waiting to meet them. When they arrived at the auto repair shop, Jimmy and Frank then loaded the stolen loot into two separate vehicles, which were then both driven away to secret locations. One by Frank and Jimmy, the other by DeSimone, Seppe, Manry, and McMahon. For the robbers, it had seemed like that the robbery had been a big success, but things were about to go downhill from there. The local police were finally contacted by the Lufthansa employees at 4:30 a.m. and the alarm was raised. In the days after the robbery, the authorities caught a lucky break. They found the black Econoline van driven by Stax Edwards outside the residence of his girlfriend 2 days later. Edwards was supposed to have driven the van to a breaker's yard to be disposed of. Instead, he had driven straight to his girlfriend's house. The police immediately seized the van, and when it was searched, they found the black ski masks used in the robbery and Edwards' fingerprints on the steering wheel, plus in the back of the vehicle they found other fingerprints belonging to the robbers. The FBI immediately began investigating after it was discovered that Edwards had been a frequent drinker at a bar called Robert's Lounge in Queens, which was owned by Jimmy Burke. By this time, Jimmy Burke was already well known to the authorities as a figure in the mafia underworld in New York City. As shown in the film Goodfellas, Burke's character, Jimmy Conway, is part of the Lucchese crime family, led by capo regime or mafia captain Paul Vario, who is played by Paul Sorvino in the film. A week later, on the 18th of December, Stax Edwards' dead body was found in his apartment by the authorities. He had been shot in the head a number of times. It is believed that this execution was carried out by Tommy DeSimone on the orders of Paul Vario. It was at this point that the bodies started to pile up, as by this point Jimmy Burke had become paranoid about the attention the robbery was receiving and had decided that the others who knew too much needed to go. The second person to be killed was Martin Krugman. At the time, Krugman was making anxious and angry demands for his $500,000 share of the loot, and he was subsequently dispatched by Burke and Angelo Seppe in early January 1979. On January the 17th, 1979, Richard Eaton, a frontman for Burke, was murdered for trying to steal money from the heist loot. It was Eaton's murder that led to Jimmy Burke's eventual 20-year incarceration in 1985 after Henry Hill's testimony against him. The following photograph shows Henry Hill at the time of his arrest in 1980 on drugs charges, at the time when he offered to turn to the witness protection program that was run by the FBI. An associate of Eaton's, Tom Montioloni, was also murdered after Burke discovered that he was conspiring with Eaton in the money laundering scheme. He was killed in March 1979. In the same month, Louis Kafora and his wife Joanna also disappeared. Kafora had originally been tasked by Burke to launder the money from the robbery legitimately. However, Kafora had a habit of drawing attention to himself. With the proceeds from the Lufthansa heist, he had purchased himself a custom-made pink Cadillac Fleetwood, and it is this that is believed to have led to both his and his wife's disappearance. The bodies of Joe Ranry and Robert McMahon were found dead 2 months later in a parked car. Both had also been involved in the robbery and they had been killed execution style. On the 13th of June 1979, the body of another member of the robbery group, Paolo Licastri, was found riddled with bullets in a rubbish dump. Licastri was not a member of the Lucchese family, but of the fellow Gambino family who had been promised a cut of the loot, which he was tasked to collect. The final robber, Angelo Seppe, was said to have been the one responsible for killing those involved in the heist on the orders of Jimmy Burke. Seppe himself was later murdered in an unrelated incident in July 1984 when he stole cash from the Lucchese family. The following photograph is of Angelo Seppe's mugshot. Tommy Di Simone himself was also murdered back in January 1979 as retaliation for the murder of 2 Gambino mafiosos, which is shown in the film Goodfellas. In the end, the only person to be charged in connection with the robbery was Louis Werner. For his part in the robbery, Werner was sentenced to 15 years in prison in January 1979. In one final twist, Vincent Asaro, a former Bonanno crime family mafioso, was charged in connection with planning the heist in 2014. However, he was acquitted the following year by a jury and the charges were dropped and he was released without charge. So there you have it, ladies and gents. That is the story of the Lufthansa heist. Thank you so much for watching, and it would really mean a lot if you could like and subscribe. This is my first video, so you may have to bear with me if the quality hasn't been that great, but keep an eye out on my channel for future videos coming very soon. Take care and stay safe.